That was a nice lift back there. But you got a lot to learn.
Crap!
You stick with me and I'll teach you a few things.
No offense, but I don't even know you.
My friends call me Sully.
Nathan Drake.
The added value of the Nathan Drake collection?
Well, I think at the core, there's all the games are remastered, right? Like I think that's something everyone's been looking forward to in terms of having games that take advantage of better processing power. So you're doing 1080p, you have a high frame rate as well. I think those are very appealing aspects to most gamers and to people who may have played the games before. There's also things like we've updated the lighting to the game, we have better textures. We're using higher polygon models to it. So a lot of it's just the visual improvements do make a big difference. And we've tried to make it so they're unified across all three games. But for us and Bluepoint, they're a studio that were very ambitious. They decided to go beyond that. They wanted to add updates. They wanted to do things a little different from a regular remaster. And I think that's what really appealed to us, is that we're providing more than just updating the graphics for it. So we've done things like we took a look at all of our community feedback, all of the feedback from game journalists, and we said, what can we address? Things they liked, they didn't like, how can we address it across all three games so that the gameplay experience matches the fact that we're trying to have a similar visual experience across all three games. So things like our gunplay mechanics are taken from roughly Uncharted 2 and applied across all three games, so it feels the same. And that was sort of the real big goal, is trying to have this unified gameplay, so it feels like you're moving from game to game and you're not having to adjust. Things don't really feel that different.
Can you tell any difference when you play the first part of the Nathan Drake collection and the third part? Is there any graphic difference? Is there any gameplay difference?
Yeah, I mean, there's still going to be some graphical differences. Our animation quality increased across all three games, the way we're able to layer the animations, the number of animations we have. Our ability to create really good facial animations for the characters also increased between 1 and 3, so you'll still see some of those. Uncharted 1 definitely feels like a different game than Uncharted 3, but things are a lot closer in quality, I guess, between everything. You'll see a lot of foliage, you'll see the environment, the lighting is starting to feel the same, the skyboxes, so the way that the sky looks like, and fire, those are all starting to look the same. And actually, if you go back and you play Uncharted 1 on the PS3 and you play Uncharted 1 on the collection, it's probably the one that's made the biggest leap because we were so early in the console cycle, but all three games are looking better than they did before.
Can you tell us about the new features of the Nathan Drake collection?
Yeah, I think probably the three features that we've added in that we're most excited about is the brutal mode, which is the hardest mode we've introduced in our game so far, and basically it's changing it so that you're playing combat scenarios a lot more tactically because there's less ammo, because it basically takes 2 shots from enemies to kill you. It takes a while for your health to regenerate, so you really have to think smartly about how you're playing it, and you have to be more strategic with it. There's an explorer mode that's for people who want to really experience a narrative and might not have experience with twin stick shooters, or that we've realized that's a barrier to entry, and so we want to make it more accessible. So it's more difficult to die from combat from gunfire from enemies, but we're not holding your hand through the entire thing. You still have to do all the puzzles, you still have to do all the climbing and basically solve all of that, so you can still die. And then we put in a speedrun mode because that's something a lot of people have been doing. We've seen a lot of people do speed runs for the Uncharted games. So we put that in, we put in leaderboards so you can compare your time with your friends.
And you already mentioned that there will be no multiplayer in the Nathan Drake collection, but what about the split screen co-op missions that you had in Uncharted 3, I believe?
Yeah, those all fell into like our multiplayer component. So all of that stuff, we're really focusing on the single player narrative. I think that really sort of creates a great, narrative arc or cohesive package to the trilogy.
Okay, and what about your personal interests? What part of the Nathan Drake collection do you like most?
It's funny because I joined Naughty Dog in 2008, just before Uncharted 2 was released, and the train sequences, you're going up and you're going from train car to train car and fighting through it, and the environment's changing. That was one of the first sequences that we had basically roughed into the game, because it was really guiding what we were doing with physics, our physics systems in the games, and a lot of how we were trying to approach game design and do different things. So when I joined Naughty Dog and I got my desk and I got my development kit, that was the first part that was relatively playable. So that's my first memory. So of course I have a strong affinity for it, because it was like, this is my memory of coming to Naughty Dog for the first time and seeing really this ambitious scope that they were trying to do.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Uncharted 4, because we know next year we'll have a new part. But what is the narrative connection between the first three parts and part 4?
Well, we've always kept the narrative between each of the games distinct enough so that they were their own story, they had their own start and end, and it didn't feel like it was to be continued or that you had to go back. So it still feels that way. And when you ended Uncharted 3, it was very clear that he was sort of leaving behind the life of fortune hunting, or that was where he was headed. And so for Uncharted 4, that's where it starts off. But then his brother comes back, and he thought his brother's dead, and his brother comes back with news of two things. One, that his life is in danger, and two, that this treasure or this location that they've both been searching for their entire lives, he has a clue to where it might be. So what you're seeing is you're learning more about Drake's past, because his brother was part of his past, and you're learning more about what Drake motivates him. If you look at all three games so far, you're delving deeper into Drake's personality and into what drives him as a human being and what he's really after. I mean, if you look at it, he's always jokey. He never really gets the treasure, but he's always, going after mythological, like larger than life things. And so, but the entire time you're learning more about him and sort of what drives him and what his past is like. And I think Uncharted 4 just continues that.